Hey everyone! In today's documentary, we travel into the deserts, mountains, and ancient cities of Central Asia, a region that witnessed one of the most dramatic yet least discussed imperial expansions in modern history. This is the story of how the Russian Empire, moving silently, steadily, and relentlessly conquered Central Asia, while the world watched, hesitated, and ultimately did nothing. How Russia conquered Central Asia and no one stopped it. In the mid-19th century, Central Asia stood at a crossroads of civilization. Once the heart of the Silk Road, it was a land of caravan trade, nomadic culture, and powerful khanates, Kokand, Khiva, and Bukhara. Their stories stretched back centuries, but their armies and governments had not kept pace with the industrializing world. The region was fragmented. The Khans fought each other more often than they united, and from the north, a new power approached. While Europe fixated on the rise of Germany, revolutions in France, and competition in Africa, the Russian Empire was preparing something far more consequential for Central Asia: a quiet conquest, a deliberate expansion, a takeover that no one stopped. Part 1: Russia's gaze turned south. For Russia, Central Asia was not just territory, it was strategy. The empire wanted a defensive buffer against rising British influence, control of trade routes leading toward Persia and China, cotton for factories, and above all, dominance in the region known as the Great Game. The Great Game, Russia versus Britain, was a geopolitical rivalry for influence in Asia. But as history would show, Russia played the game with moves on the ground, while Britain hesitated from afar. Across the Kazakh steppe, Russia began constructing forts, small dots on the map that would become stepping stones for an empire. Part 2: The first wedge. The Kazakh steppe. The Kazakh steppe was the first frontier. For centuries, the Kazakh nomadic clans had roamed freely, but internal struggles and pressure from rival groups weakened their cohesion. As early as the 1700s, some clans sought Russian protection, not knowing that such protection came with a heavy price. By the 1820s and 1830s, Russia expanded its network of fortresses: Orneburg, Semipilotnitz, Petropavlovsk, Verny. Each fort was a pin on the map, slowly connecting into a chain. Rebellions followed, including the famous uprising led by Kenessary Kasimov, the last Kazakh Khan to resist Russian expansion. His struggle, though heroic, stood no chance against the rifles and artillery of a modern empire. By the mid-19th century, the Kazakh steppe, roughly one-third the size of the United States, was absorbed into Russia with barely a reaction from the world. And this opened the gates to the south. Part 3: Toward the Khanates. Now Russia faced the three great Khanates: Kokand, Khiva, and Bukhara. These were societies rooted in centuries-old traditions, but divided internally and militarily outdated. Their armies relied on cavalry charges and muskets, while Russia fielded disciplined infantry, modern rifles, and powerful artillery. The conquest was inevitable. Part 4: The fall of Kokand. Kokand was the first domino. In the 1850s, Russia built fortified posts along the Sir-Darya River. In 1853, General Perovsky launched an assault on Akhmechet, a strategic Kokandi fortress. After a bloody siege, it fell. The Russians renamed it Fort Perovsky. This victory echoed across the region. In 1864, Russian General Chernyayev marched through the steppe, capturing Alyata and Chinkin. By 1865, the prize was in sight: Tashkent, the largest, richest city of Central Asia. Chernyayev attacked with fewer troops than the defenders. Yet Russian discipline and firepower proved decisive. Within days, the city fell. Tashkent became the capital of the new territory, Russian Turkestan. Kokand's fate was sealed, but the campaign had only begun. Part 5: The Emirate of Bukhara. Next, Russia moved against Bukhara, an ancient Islamic center, a city of scholars, and a proud emirate. In 1866, Russian forces clashed with Bukharan armies in two major battles. Kyrgyzstan, the emir's forces fought bravely but lacked modern weapons. Step by step, Russia pushed toward Samarkand, one of the jewels of the Islamic world. After the Russians captured Samarkand, the emir realized resistance was hopeless. In 1868, Bukhara became a Russian protectorate, officially independent. In reality, controlled by St. Petersburg. The world took notice, but once again, no one intervened. Part 6. Khiva. The Desert Kingdom. Only one major state remained unconquered, the Khanate of Khiva. Khiva was surrounded by harsh desert, making invasion difficult. For years, Russian campaigns failed due to sandstorms, lack of water, and disease. But in 1873, the Russians launched a meticulously planned invasion from several directions at once. The Khivan army, armed mostly with outdated muskets, was overwhelmed. The Khan surrendered. Khiva became another Russian protectorate. Now Russia controlled nearly all of Central Asia. Part 7. Why no one stopped Russia. Why did no one stop the Russians? Why did the Great Game remain mostly a one-sided affair? There were several reasons. 1. The Khanates were divided instead of forming alliances. The Khanates often fought one another. Russia exploited these divisions masterfully. 2. The military gap was immense. Cavalry charges and traditional fortresses were no match for rifles, artillery, and organized infantry. 3. Britain didn't want war. Although Britain feared Russia's approach toward India, it judged the cost of direct conflict too high. Diplomacy and caution won over intervention. 4. Geography favored Russia. Russia advanced overland. Britain would have needed a massive, risky expedition across mountains and deserts. 5. Russia's strategy was slow and calculated. It wasn't a sudden conquest. It was a steady crawl, fort by fort, treaty by treaty, battle by battle. By the time the world realized what had happened, the conquest was complete. Part 8. The final chapter. The end of Kokand. Though Kokand had lost Tashkent, it still existed barely. The Fergana Valley was fiercely independent. Rebellions erupted frequently. But every uprising gave Russia a new excuse to intervene. In 1875, a massive rebellion weakened the Khanate. Russia responded with overwhelming strength. In a swift campaign, Russian forces under General Skobelev defeated Kokand and annexed it outright. The Khanate of Kokand ceased to exist. Central Asia was now a Russian domain from the Caspian Sea to the borders of China. Part 9. Under Russian rule. What followed was a transformation. Russia built railroads, tax systems, administrative centers. Cotton plantations. Cotton, in particular, became Russia's economic lifeline. Central Asia supplied the raw material that fed Russian factories. The cultural impact was equally significant. Traditional elites lost political power. The influence of Islamic scholars was reduced. Russian settlers occupied fertile lands. Especially in Kazakhstan, new cities emerged with European-style architecture. While some reforms brought modernization, others disrupted centuries-old traditions. The region would never be the same. Part 10. Britain's response. Too little, too late. By the 1880s, Britain finally realized that Russia's advance had changed the balance of power. But by then, it was too late. Russia had consolidated its hold on Central Asia. Britain raced to fortify Afghanistan as a buffer state, fearing Russian influence there. The Anglo-Afghan wars were part of this strategy. But Central Asia itself remained firmly under Russian control. The Great Game ended not with a dramatic clash, but with quiet acceptance. Part 11. The 20th century. From Empire to Soviet Union. The conquest's legacy didn't end with the Russian Empire. In 1917, revolution tore Russia apart. Central Asia saw uprisings, brief independence movements, and years of conflict. But by the 1920s, the Soviet Union reabsorbed the region. New republics were drawn: Kazakh SSR, Uzbek SR, Turkmen SSR, Kyrgyz SR, Tajik SSR. These borders created in Moscow still define Central Asia today. Under Soviet rule, the region was industrialized, but it also faced collectivization, repression, and cultural restrictions. Russian influence grew deeper, especially through language and settlement. Even after the Soviet collapse in 1991, the imprint of the old empire remained visible. Part 12. A legacy that shaped a continent. The conquest of Central Asia reshaped a continent. It determined the borders of modern Central Asian nations, the political geography of Eurasia, the cultural influences across the region, Russia's strategic depth for centuries, and the foundation for the modern Silk Road trade routes. It transformed deserts into industrial centers, and ancient khanates into modern republics. Yet the conquest itself remains one of the least told stories of the 19th century. A conquest without a great war. A conquest without an international outcry. A conquest so steady, it was almost invisible. In the end, Russia conquered Central Asia not with a single decisive battle, but with decades of patience, power, and persistence. The khanates were brave but divided. Britain was wary but hesitant, and Russia simply kept moving. Fort by fort, treaty by treaty, city by city. Until one day, the map had changed completely. An entire region became part of an empire, and no one stopped it.